Thank you for joining us today for our Bullying Response Process webinar. My name is Carla Jimenez. I'm the coordinator of Family and Community Engagement and also a parent. I have a high school student and I have a kindergartner here in the districts. So I know firsthand the challenge that our teenagers face, not only in the school environment, but in general. So today's presentation will give us much to think about and help us be prepared to better support that social emotional well-being of our students. But before we move on to our presentation, I would like to let you know that the presentation is being recorded. It will be available it will be available on our website. So we want to go to the next screen. It will be available at this link, u-46.org/webinars. And it will also be sent to you via email. What we'd ask is that you please use the Q&A box today for questions, and we'll have some time towards the end of the presentation to answer the questions. In the chat box, we're going to share some of the main points and some of the links throughout the presentation, so make sure that you have that open. And remember to please do not include any identifying information, as this is a public forum and it is being recorded. So now let me introduce our presenters this morning. We have Ms. Keisha Williams, and she's a licensed clinical social worker and also the social emotional response team specialist. Mr. Rob Luck, as well, licensed clinical social worker, and he is also a social emotional response team specialist, also known as CERT. So now without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to them.
Thank you so much, Carla. It's good to be with you all this morning on such a really important topic for our time, especially in distance learning. And this presentation comes as a part of several initiatives for the month of October, which nationally has been identified as Bullying Prevention Month. And so I just wanted to put that out there. But again, I'm so glad that we can do this and hopefully bring empowerment to those people who are in the audience, clarify a few things. Just a bit about myself is that this is my 6th year working in School District U46. All 6 of those years have been working in the Office of Student Discipline. And I'm just really thankful to be able to be a part of this team, really focusing on restorative practices, which we'll get to in just a bit. Just a brief word about our team. As was mentioned in the slide, you can see that the technical name for us is Social Emotional Response Team. And we're comprised of 3 specialists, all with school social work training and licensure. And we are a district-wide team. And in the context of bullying, we do act as an independent third party of sorts that helps come alongside students, families, and school staff who are experiencing a crisis. And we do get a chance to help process emotions and thoughts in bullying cases, clarify facts of cases, and then also find restorative resolutions. But we'll talk more about that shortly. But that's just really a focus of ours for our team. And we are led by a coordinator of student discipline and educational options, Dr. Robin Barraza. But I'll hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Keisha Williams, for a short intro for her too.
Thank you, Rob. And Carla, thank you for hosting these events. They are so very important, and we are glad to have this platform. My name is Keisha Williams. I have been in the school district. This is my 21st school year and my 5th year in this department. And I am actually happy to be here. Primarily, a lot of the work that I have been focused on, in addition to what my colleague had mentioned, is transition work and mentor support work. And all of this is related to just the work that we do through Office of Student Discipline and Educational Options. And we have another member of our team. She's not presenting with us this morning, but she is also a CERT and her name is Elizabeth Farrell. And so she is also a member of the team. So we can go to the next slide. So today we will present to you definitions of bullying and how, the difference between how we just kind of colloquially define bullying, how we, when we're just talking amongst ourselves versus how the law and student policy defines bullying. We'll talk about the types of bullying, what to do if you have a student who is being bullied, and then how the district responds when there has been a case that has been referred for bullying. So we hope that we won't be before you long, but we hope that you will be empowered by this presentation.
Thanks, Keisha. And we'll come back to those objectives after we get through and make sure that we're all on the same page. But as my colleague had mentioned, we wanted to start off with just kind of the definitions that are out there before we start using a lot of them. And I would just piggyback on what Keisha had mentioned, in that a lot of cases that we get, parents might think that the definition for bullying is more open and it doesn't necessarily align to the more technical definition and that we are in, the landscape that we're in public education in the state of Illinois. And so we have links that are going to be provided for you all as good social workers to put those tools into your hands so that you can read the documents for yourself. When it comes to the more technical definition of bullying, that's actually coming and originating from our state statute, from the school code. And then that's directly lifted into our U46 school board policy. Again, those resources will be able, you'll be able to see those and access those. But we're going to go into some of the different categories that more technical definition speaks to. And again, just to reiterate, all public schools in our state have to abide by this definition. And so it's helpful not even just for U46, but for other districts as well. All right, so right off the bat, we wanted to make sure that it was clear that when it comes to the common use versus the technical use of the term bullying, there's some differences. And while we know that people have experiences with what they might think is bullying, we have to abide by what all public schools do with the state statute. And so in this case, you can see there that when it comes to if it's a one-off incident, or does it have to be multiple in order for that to be classified accurately as bullying. And it's about 10 years ago that the statute changed. And as you can see, we've added emphasis there. It does state that any severe or pervasive physical or verbal act. So when you're thinking about the technical definition, it is inaccurate to say that just because it happened once, then that event can't be bullying. There's some very grievous events that can happen in a singular incident. And so it does permit for that. We have a bit more there when it comes to, again, cyberbullying. We're going to be talking about that shortly. But wanted to make sure that that was clear. It does not have to simply be multiple occasions. But even if it is one singular incident, it still has to meet different kind of content area criteria. And that's what we have before you on the slide right now. So just continuing with the idea of, on the technical level, bullying is defined by the impact it has on the alleged victim. So keep that in mind as well. The first really area that of impact to alleged victims for it to be classified appropriately as bullying is a threat. As you can read there, the language, a reasonable fear of harm to the person, the student's person or property. The second area deals with what they call substantially detrimental effect. So that's really the health area of impact to a victim, carrying on that it substantially interferes with the student's academics, and as well as their participation, their ability to participate in services that the school provides, activities. And so looking at these, it can get kind of heavy, and that's where we come alongside students and parents to really help kind of walk through some of these areas, because it's not up, simply to you all to have that burden to figure that out. Our team, when we get assigned, again, on a district level, we look at all the evidence that we can see that might meet up with these definitions. And that's something we take very seriously. For every report that comes in, we do look for the evidence that's available. And then even if it doesn't meet that criteria, it can still be classified as other behavior events in our code of conduct, our student code of conduct. So, but without further ado with that, we do have different types though, and I'll hand it off to my colleague for that.
Thank you, Rob. So yes, so we've talked about how it's defined and the impact it needs to have in order for us to be able to label it as bullying. And again, even if it doesn't fall or qualify under bullying, it could qualify for something else. But here are the types that when you click on the link to our website that you will find defined by the district. Excuse me, there are 3 types. The first one is biased behavior, and this would be any types of behavior that would be prejudicial, if you will, towards another student. So whether it's based on religion, ethnicity, race, sexuality, and so on and so forth, those would be the types of behaviors that would fall under bullying based on biased behavior. The next one would be sexual harassment, bullying based on sexual harassment, and that would be any unwanted sexual advances towards a student, and that is just harassing in that kind of way. And then the one that you'll find much more detail about would be cyberbullying. And cyberbullying would be anything in a virtual space that would be fall under the definition of bullying in the virtual space. And for us to be able to actually take action, it would also have to impact the student in our academic setting. And that's when we would be able to, have a little jurisdiction, if you will, to respond and have some sort of perhaps recourse if we found it. But under cyberbullying, excuse me, it would include using your computers, any social media, your telephones, anything in a virtual type space. And so not just the direct, where it's like literally if a person is directly sending messages to a student or a person, but it would also include indirect. So for example, if someone has used your name or your student's name to create a page or put up images that would be taunting or that was not approved by that other person. And so those things would also fall under cyberbullying. The other thing that I want to, more of a prevention kind of tip is, with us being in this virtual space, there are a lot of things that, we're getting links from teachers. We have our Chromebooks. And so you want to be very, you want to make sure that you're keeping protected those links and your password to your social media, to your classroom information. You don't want anyone to have access to that such that they could potentially manipulate your social media or any of those platforms that you have. We have seen situations, and I have seen situations where a student has saved their has shared their password with someone that they thought they could trust. And a lot of times it's a significant other. And unfortunately, it hasn't ended well because when things didn't go well, there were, in some cases, information that was shared taken from that person's account. And so we just really caution and try to empower our students by letting them know, hey, the best way to prevent some of this from happening is to just keep your information private and do not share it. So that's more of a safety tip, but we use all of those things to try to help us when we are, we use screenshots and any records that are available to help us to really pinpoint if there's a case of cyberbullying and how it's impacting the student. And so, Rob, I think you may have a, did you want to share a situation?
Sure. Yeah, we had a recent case that was really similar to what Ms. Williams was talking about. In that case, there was a post on a social media application, and certain U46 students' pictures were on there. And so when it came through the online reporting tool, which again, we'll link that, you can submit that anonymously, or if you want to put your name, but it came through and we were assigned to a case. I was assigned to that case and was able to reach out to those students and make sure that, again, to Keisha's point, if this is an approved use of that student's picture or not, we do want to make sure that that's front and center. And in that case, the students were able to really report that, and those pictures were taken down. The site was taken down. So we do try our best to do what we can to identify those students, and then as well as just be able to focus on the things that students should, their academics and their social emotional learning in that context. I did want to add too that in other cases, it's something that I think, as far as we've talked about the definition of bullying and then what can parents do, being a parent, I know it's not an easy thing. But these devices that our students have, sometimes they're quite expensive for cell phones. It can be over $1,000 potentially, plus the service, monthly service charges. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that when it comes to cyberbullying, that just to be present with your student and have an ongoing conversation about how they're doing and how they're engaging in this really unique time of distance learning, but also that keep in mind that they're most likely your device. And so making sure that any passwords that are on there, most of the carriers have a parental control, and that's just something else to keep in mind. We've had other cases where students have passwords that their parents don't know, even though it's really on their device. So as well as the fact that keep in mind that U46 Chromebooks, they are monitored. That's for students as well, for protection there. So that's an additional feature that we can look at the evidence, and we do when it comes to cyberbullying. Something we take really, really seriously, and with more time, as Ms. Williams said, we want to get ahead of that curve. So, all right, and along with the different types of bullying, we named this presentation about the process that we take in our district. Well, it's really important, as you can see on the slide, that we keep in mind that there's a process. There's different levels that we should be following if there is an incident that does happen. There's an online bullying form, as we mentioned, that's on the U46 homepage. And but it's also important to keep in mind there's a publication that we have that really is what you're looking at, and it lays out the idea that for matters of student discipline, for example, if it comes to bullying, that first contact hopefully is with the teacher, your student's teacher, and they're able to really, they have the most observation of what's happening in their classrooms. And so they're the point person on so much. And even if it does go to the next contact, to that school administrator, for example, they're still going to connect back with the teacher to see what they've seen or what they've heard. But sometimes the tires get spinning a little bit, and that's where I mentioned for our team from more of a district level, we can come alongside those schools as well as students and parents or guardians in order to kind of be a more independent third party of sorts. And again, as I mentioned, that's just a process piece that you can be aware of. If you submit it directly to the district, then we'll make sure that we connect with the school as well. But just wanted to include that as a process, so that you can see the extent to which we support and take every report seriously. Gonna just continue on, and with the definition and the process of bullying, it's really important too to understand that the notion of confidentiality of student records. Invariably, in cases that come to our desk, one of the big questions that we have from parents, and I think it's a natural question, is if there's evidence to say that it was founded as bullying, then the parents want to know, and the student may indeed want to know, what happens to the alleged offender, or in that case, what happens to the offender. The confidentialities that were under, the acts that we're under, are both on a state as well as a federal level. And so that is restricted in terms of who can know your student's information, or conversely, what you can know about other students. It's limited in that regard, in terms of just what is pertaining to your student. I would say, though, that again, we wanted to make sure that you had access to those acts, and those will be resourced and linked in the presentation. So it's also important, though, that there is a sense of how things get brought to be made right. And that's a big phrase that we use here with our team. And so Ms. Williams in a moment is going to speak about restorative practices, but I think it's really important, again, when it comes to confidentiality, that we reflect on the student code of conduct, and how things are made right in individual cases with students that have a lot of different factors that play into how they behave and some of the thoughts they might be thinking. So a really important piece there. But we'll move ahead to Ms. Williams to speak a little bit more about the code of conduct.
So here we have a link for you to the student code of conduct, and most students should actually have received and had to sign for a copy. In the past, it's been in the student planner, and but if you can't find it or what have you, we have put the link here to it in this presentation. Here we wanted to show you essentially what the administrator, the options in responding that administrators have as far as consequences that can be given. Because again, since we can't share specifically what consequences students have because of the confidentiality that my colleague has shared, we wanted to present to you the diagram of this here for you to see that this is kind of the range, and it'll be up to each administrator's based on their investigation and what they deem appropriate as far as the consequences. And as you can see on here, there's a range of levels that depending on the situation, depending on the severity. And even though we pulled out, because we're talking about bullying, you'll find in the student code of conduct the whole list of all of the possible behavior events that could happen. And again, if, for example, if it's unfounded for bullying, it's potentially could fall under a different category. So, just being unfounded in bullying doesn't mean that there may not be another category that fits it more appropriately, and then they would follow that sequence of possible consequences and so on and so forth. So we wanted to make sure that, because it's natural to be curious and to want to know what's happening to the other student that was involved. And so here we wanted to make sure you saw the range of the guidelines, so to speak, that administrators have. So.
And Keisha, I would just add to that the statute for our state, I think they've done a good job. It is a high bar, it is more technical. But again, just because if it doesn't meet those criteria, it doesn't mean that nothing restorative would happen. Just keep that in mind as we're processing these things. But we do, again, hold the evidence that we can get to up to those criteria. I'm just going to add that and move on to the next there.
So as Rob has mentioned before, restorative practices, and again, you will find this on the website. Really nationally, the U.S. Department of Education is really taking a movement to move away from strictly punitive consequences to behaviors that are happening, and really trying to be more restorative, more helping students to grow and empower students and to learn more appropriate ways of being. So restorative practices is an approach that, as you can see, the International Institute for Restorative Practices is an organization that has been training definitely in our country, across the world, people on restorative practices, so that we know how to execute them and we know all the elements. And one of the major foundational pieces is that everyone in the community has value. Everyone is a part of the community and has value and contributes to the community. And so that is really kind of the foundation that restorative practices comes from. And so therefore, when an incident or something happens that causes harm, then restorative practices suggest that we move to restore relationships and repair harm. And essentially that is by empowering everyone to have voice and giving, people a chance to be a part, to come alongside with, to help us to restore the community. And it is not about not being, having consequences, or not having some sort of situation where you may have that might be punitive, but it's really all about kind of, okay, accept responsibility for the action, and let's talk about how do we repair the harm, and then so that hopefully everybody can come back and be part of the community again. And essentially it seems like we've been talking probably mostly about the student who has been bullied, but this really kind of brings everybody. So the student who has been on the receiving end of the bullying, the student who may have been the one that's been bullied. We, all means all, right? That's part of our motto. And so we definitely want to make sure that students who on either side, that we are repairing relationships, repairing harm, and trying to make it right, so that everyone is able to come back to school and feel comfortable and safe in the school setting. And you can go to the next slide. Thank you. And essentially, I also want to make it very clear and plain that, what we're talking about when we talk about restoring and repairing harm, this is definitely a voluntary situation. So we're certainly not going to do anything that is going to do harm or continue the harm, but we definitely are looking to repair the harm. So what you'll find on the district website is listed here, the types of restorative practices. You have conversations, you have conferences, and circles. The conversation is essentially that. It's, again, given the opportunity, it's an adult having a conversation with students about, whatever has happened, giving them the opportunity to talk about in a, oftentimes a one-on-one type of situation, but really giving the students the chance to be heard and to listen to what has happened and what's going on. It's also a time for the adult to assess whether or not the students would be willing and are ready to perhaps come together for a restorative conference. The conference would be where The students would be brought together, again, if everybody is ready for coming together and willing to come together to have a restorative conference and talk about the harm that was done, how it impacted the individual and perhaps the community as a whole, and what would be some fair things to do to repair the harm that's done. Now with the circle, a circle essentially is a larger group of students coming together, and what you'll hear or may have already heard your students talk about morning meetings. And this is a time where literally when we're in person, we literally circle up. You have a circle, you get in a circle, and perhaps you do a check-in. And so everybody would go around, and usually there's a talking piece. And when you have the talking piece, perhaps in a morning circle, you're just checking in and talking about how was your, how was your morning or the evening. And this gives everyone a chance to have voice. And again, it's voluntary. So if you get the talking piece and you don't want to talk, you can say pass and it'll go on. Well, in that regard, by setting that, establishing that as a routine, the circle is again what we call it. When it's time to actually circle up for when there has been a infraction or harm done, the students are already familiar with the process, and it doesn't seem like it's just a punitive thing. So circles don't always happen just as a result of a problem that has happened, but this is all part of the restorative practices approach that again teaches students how to come together as a community, how to have draw on the collective wisdom of everybody. And so essentially that is the restorative practices approach. Next.
Thank you for that, Keisha. I just wanted to speak to when it comes to making it right. That really is one thing to say we do that at school. I think it's another thing to make sure that as much as possible that's also happening in the home setting. And I think that's really where we're going to be giving that same aligned message across the board to students and how that looks and so forth. So just wanted to kind of reflect a little bit about what we've talked about. Again, we've just heard about restorative practices and kind of what bullying is and how it can be reported. We talked about the statutory definition, that more technical definition. I wanted to take a moment here in this next slide to speak to another piece of that statute and our school board policy that looks to preventing bullying. And that's something where the statute speaks to certain areas that we should be looking at if the data is showing it's happening in certain settings. And so we've really taken that as a pilot project to look at elementary recess and look and see what we can do on the preventive side to get kind of ahead of what's happening or better understand the reality there. And so I had an opportunity last school year, and I just wanted to complete that pilot I had, and I just wanted to read a couple of quotes that I think really go part and parcel with that work. The namesake of my alma mater, Jane Addams, she said in 1909 that recreation is stronger than vice, and recreation alone can stifle the lust for vice. Again, that was in 1909, obviously different language, but over 110 years ago, they were seeing that this specific area was really potential for growth. Additionally, she had mentioned that only in the modern city have men concluded that it is no longer necessary for the municipality to provide for that insatiable desire for play. Insofar as they've acted on that, she had said again in 1909 that they've entered a most difficult and dangerous experiment. And I know that just in cases that we've gotten, where I've gone to recess to observe, we talk about bullying. This is sometimes where it shows up. And so this pilot really speaks to several items, objectives I'll get to. The last quote, though, I wanted to give to you was that from Lee Hanmer, again, over 110 years ago. He said, "The playground of today is the republic of tomorrow." And that has been my experience, is that what you see happening on the playground, from the noon hour supervisors who are serving there to the students and how they connect, that it really can be a reflection of maybe what happens after. But again, in short, this pilot is us taking that statute and bringing it to life when it comes to what are we doing on the prevention side. And again, in short, the objectives there are really to come alongside the staff and empower them. It can be a challenging situation where you might know that student from the neighborhood and so on, but empowering them is the first and foremost thing that we wanted to do with that pilot, but also exciting students to make sure that they're having more rigorous exercise and getting that energy out. You know, as a parent, again, that's something that is super important for sleep and just emotional health and mental health as well. We also looked at, in this pilot, how to what would a model play, I call it PlayStation, not the electronic type, but what would that look like if we had more of a model playground area? That was another facet. And then lastly, for the pilot, we looked at, again, this is with one school. We hope to ramp that up, but the last piece was just enabling partnerships within our communities that we can come alongside and support students in this specific space. So again, that was just something that we wanted to share when it comes to, it's not just a statute that, you know, or board policy that we don't really touch. This is happening now. And again, I think it speaks to preventing bullying again, for our presentation today. So with that though, again, as we mentioned, this presentation falls in the month of October. Nationally for the US, that's Bullying Prevention Month. We have a couple other initiatives that we are implementing, and one of them is going to be for more of the elementary primary students, really again trying to get at that formative age for students. And there's going to be a read aloud that our own superintendent Sanders is going to be doing, but then there's also one that's in English. There's also another in Spanish that we're going to have. So stay tuned for that when it comes to before the end of the month. That'll be pushed out and available to watch. There's also a few other school-specific activities that we have for this month. But again, I do thank everyone for being here, and hopefully in the question and answer section, we can get to some more maybe practical questions that you might have, but I would just note that if you could please just de-identify some of those so that we're making sure that we're maintaining privacy. I'd also say too, if you're more on the data side of things, about where is U46 when it comes to bullying data, stay tuned. Every year, the Director of School Safety and Culture, Mr. John Heiderscheit, gives a presentation at one of the school board meetings, and he goes into more of that data piece. So hopefully that can be helpful there. But again, thanks for being here. And at this point, I'll turn it back to Ms. Carla.
Yes, thank you all for joining.
Yes.
Thank you both for joining us. Thank you, Ms. Keisha and Mr. Rob. All this information is very, very helpful. Please, if you have any questions, include those in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Remember, don't include any identifying information, please. You will receive via email a copy of this recording and a copy of the presentation in PDF format with the links available. And in the email, you're also going to find a link to our survey. So please take a moment to complete that. The survey will also provide an opportunity to include your contact information in case we're not able to answer your question today, or if you need some kind of follow-up from our presenters this morning. Make sure to visit our U46 Engage webinars page to see our upcoming webinars and to register for those. Topics coming up include language development and understanding an IEP. So visit our page to find out a little bit more about those. And the link to our digital learning website, that one's a good one to bookmark. Here, you're going to find the most updated information on our distance learning tools and information, including our hybrid model coming up around the corner here. For more information, if you have additional questions, please reach out to our school safety and culture department. Here is the link to their website. And you can also use our Let's Talk tool available on our homepage. Now, if you have questions, we'll go ahead and move on to answer those. Again, if you want to enter any of those questions in that Q&A option that's located at the bottom of your screen. I don't see any coming right now yet. We'll give it a few seconds. But maybe I don't know if you want to talk about collaboration with our community partners with regards to this throughout the school year.
In regard to bullying, you mean, and just in terms of our process that we take?
Sure, yes.
Sure. I guess one of the things that sometimes comes up is with cases and parents are wanting to, or they already have reached out maybe to a local police department, say in the instance of cyberbullying, and they're not really sure where to go. That was one of the reasons why we were wanting to empower you all with kind of that process, what it looks like. But sometimes when it comes to the police department, again, it deals with the statute on more of on that code level. So the school code pertains to obviously educators, whereas the criminal code pertains to a different statute. And so one of the times where we, collaborate would possibly be where a parent is not really knowing where to go on it. And, nothing that we do when it comes to our investigation or support or that a school does really gets in the way of parents pursuing, reaching out to their police department. It's a separate kind of track. So that's one of the areas that we do, but clearly too with community mental health providers, they realize the importance of bullying prevention and awareness. Even to the point of how bystanders can really have a big role in de-escalating, something. And I know that our community mental health providers have done some webinars as well, reiterating that. So if that's helpful.
And also, I would add to well, not necessarily to that, but just to reiterate, so the links that we've given you, if you say, for example, you don't have a student, but you have, maybe it's a niece or someone that's not your child, and you have knowledge of bullying that's happening, and whether you're an adult or the child, perhaps you're not, again, the guardian, so to have the information for the teacher's name or so on and so forth, you can submit, there is a form, online bullying form that you can submit information about bullying that you're aware of if you're not perhaps the guardian and able to follow that chain of command because you're not, a guardian. So there are ways that students can use the form or adults. So that's usually how we would end up getting directly involved in those kinds of cases. Our department would come along for cases that are student to student types of bullying. And if there was something that was more from an adult, our department doesn't handle those types of bullying situations. That would be handled from a different department. So primarily we've been covering the process for student to student type of bullying, but there is a process if that there was some concern, that was happening from from an adult that you want to report. So those options are available.
And I would just add that even in distance learning, we still interview and work on cases virtually. So, that hasn't been an issue either. But I think we had a question. Carla, can you access that or?
Yeah. Question is, are parents notified when a bullying form is submitted against their child?
Yeah, so I can answer that. If your student has been identified as an alleged victim in a report, even if you weren't the party that filed that report, we do reach out to you. That's again if it's the online bullying report on a district level. We do that, and that's a time sensitive thing in terms of the work that we do. And so we do reach out as soon as that comes in to just make contact. And in the case that was referenced earlier, sometimes the parents are not aware of what had happened, especially if it's on a cyberbullying basis, but we do make contact and then again, help kind of walk through that, processing these emotions, which can be really intense. If we didn't get that across, bullying can be a very intense and a matter of life and death. Not to to make that point too strongly, but it is very true that the impact that these things, whether it's ongoing, it really can eat away at someone's identity over time. And so, but yeah, we do definitely reach out to the students who were identified, the alleged victims' parents.
How about the alleged offender?
So in terms of, our work with our team, the alleged offender is something where the investigation that's completed with the school, they have the same, rights to a due process of, what has been said to have happened, and what is their side of the story. Clearly when it comes to the school, reaching out to them, there's a process there as well, where the school administrator would want to connect with a parent. We never would want to do something just in isolation where the parent is unaware of what's taking place. Making sure that it's a sustainable solution that we're going forward with, if it's just with the student. Yeah, I think that maybe, I don't know, Keisha, if you have anything further, but for all students identified, we want to make sure that we're positioning students to be able to restore what has been broken, if indeed it has been broken. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
Yes, thank you for the questions. Thank you, Keisha. Thank you, Rob. And we will see you soon. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.